Okay, just get rid of the sausage roll bag there. Not that I'm a stereotype or anything. Okay, another week, another very competent crossover SUV style car from the Big Volkswagen Automotive Group. Big Vag, if you like. So this one's called the SEAT Tarraco, or Tarraco, depending on which way you want to spell it. And yes, it's named after a place in Spain, like most of the other SEATs are, but sadly, not the best place in Spain. Yep. Maybe they'll do a pickup truck and call it that. Anywho's, this has 7 seats and it costs from £28,500, which is kinda good when you compare it to, say, the Land Rover Discovery Sport with 7 seats, but also kinda baffling when you compare it to the virtually identical other 7-seat SUV from the Big Vag, the Skoda Kodiaq. There is the Tiguan Allspace too, but we'll leave that to one side for this video for the sake of time and simplicity. So when you think about it, I could just skip this whole review really and show you the Skoda Kodiaq one that I did with overdubs. Most 7-seat SUVs, like this one, feel absolutely massive. Tarraco feels compact, which is good. Of course, the diesels will be the best-selling. Tarraco. That's fine because they're smooth and quiet in that way that all Volkswagen diesels are. But that'll probably be dead weird, so maybe not. So before we go into the car, what's the crack with the Tarraco? Oh. This Kodiaq thing is a thing. Both have 7 seats, exactly the same chassis, virtually identical dimensions, and yet the Skoda is thousands of pounds cheaper. Even more so if you actually don't need the 6th and 7th chairs and you just want the space. You can't buy a 5-seat Tarraco, but you can buy a 5-seat Kodiaq. Having said that, and at the risk of accidentally meandering into a horrific black hole of cost and equipment analysis, you do get a lot of standard stuff with a Tarraco. I'll talk about that in a minute, but for now, here's what sort of Tarraco you can buy. Quite a simple range, as usual for SEAT, presumably because it's aimed at youth and kids are stupid, you know? There are 3 engines. These ones. And it comes with a manual as standard, but obviously it's a Volkswagen Group car, so you can have DSG and 4x4 if you want. The usual stuff. It really is getting harder and harder to tell all these cars apart. It happens to be a diesel with a manual gearbox I'm driving today, so let's go to the car. So if I run out of things to say, which I probably will quite quickly in this car because it's just a Volkswagen Group car, then I'll start talking about the door pockets because they're so big that my substantially sized bottle is rattling around. It's very important to know that stuff. We'll do the glove box now as well while we're at it. Yeah, that's substantial also, although actually, in fairness, some of the space is taken up by what appears to be a CD player. Remember them? Right, I need to move that bottle because it actually is literally rattling around. But that gives me a chance to tell you that also there are pockets on the back of the seats. Although because there are tables there, access to those pockets, it turns out, isn't easy. There you go. You do get tables on the back of the seats as standard. It's almost as though I find this car really good, but also a reviewer's worst nightmare because it is so dull. And that's not really what SEAT is supposed to be about. On that though, what SEAT is supposed to be about is being engaging to drive, dynamic, youthy, etc. And on that front, the Tarraco does kind of succeed in the sense that it is a lot better to drive, a lot more involving to drive than a car this size and shape should be. Having said that, that's not really specific to it being a SEAT, that's just because this platform's really good. The Kodiaq's pretty much the same, as I recall. Tiguan Allspace also. Volkswagen has managed to make these MQB platformed SUVs drive really nicely. I'll give you an example. Last week I was doing a Porsche event and drove a couple of Boxsters. And you would expect that getting out of a Boxster and into this car would make this car feel absolutely awful. If you've ever been go-karting before, you know that feeling when you get out of the go-kart and you go back into your car in the car park and all of a sudden it just feels really light and the steering feels ridiculous and it's all bouncy. No matter what sort of car you've got. That first few moments, it's difficult to judge just how a regular car is supposed to turn compared to a go-kart. It should feel like that. It should feel ridiculous getting back into this car after driving a Porsche Boxster, which is of course the epitome of like brilliant on-road driving dynamics. But it actually didn't. Got into this and this still felt canny to drive. This does have slightly firm ride quality, and I haven't driven a Kodiaq for a little while, but it feels like it might be a little bit firmer than that car. But it only really feels like that if you're putting it under the microscope. I don't think anybody will find this uncomfortable. Generally the body control's really good, but it still manages to be comfortable because there isn't a lot of turbulence coming up through the cabin. It's just set up really well. It feels like composed while having a bit of movement in the body so it's not too harsh. Volkswagen has nailed that now, right? And it would take a spectacular amount of effort from the Spanish to unravel it all. And they haven't, so there you go, move on. One thing you do notice about this car though, when you get up past like 40, 50, is that it has a terrible wind noise problem. It's the vegan of SUVs, it's just constant wind. The problem is, I think it's the shape of these mirrors. They're similar shape of the ones you get in the Leon and the other Seats. I don't know whether it's because they're bigger or they're placed higher or something, but the whistle you get from them is awful, really intrusive, and it's a shame because in every other way this is a Volkswagen Group car. This diesel's really refined for a diesel. There's hardly any tyre noise. It has this one problem that sticks out like a sore thumb. Honestly, I think that's the only thing that you could point at as really problematic in this car. The infotainment's great, the ergonomics are brilliant. As I said before, it's dead composed to drive. It has no real problems, and for me as well, the interior quality is much better than you'd get in, say, the Land Rover Discovery Sport, as is the infotainment and just the clarity of the dashboard and the whole experience in general. Although, I would say that, wouldn't I, because I am biased towards German cars. To stay with the Discovery Sport though, I do have to say that that does feel more luxurious than this car. It does ride with more comfort. Despite all its flaws and despite the fact that I think that this is better in most ways, the Sport somehow feels a class above this. I think it's probably to do with the association with Range Rover or something, I don't know. But I'll say it now that I would put my money into this over one of those any day of the week. And also, right, I shouldn't say this, but what's been brilliant about this car is it's really basic, and when you're a car reviewer, you tend not to get sent basic stuff. Car companies would say that's because they want us to be able to see like all the features and stuff. Nothing to do with just trying to bamboozle us with top of the range stuff all the time. But this has got cloth seats, I'm touching the cloth here, and there wasn't even a button to shut the boot. I actually had to pull it down using my arms. The good thing about that is, what I can say now with certainty is that the basic version of this car is actually very lovely, feels really well equipped. It does feel, I'm gonna go into cliche here, but like all the car you could ever need. Digital instrument display, again, really good infotainment. It just feels nice. Driving modes, not that it really makes any difference, it just makes the throttle feel a bit more aggressive and the steering a bit heavier for no real reason. Still, it's nice to have. And then that just makes you appreciate all the little things about this car that they've actually thought about. So it's got this secondary glove box here, which is probably bigger than a standard French glove box. Again, substantial door pockets. It follows on from how well these things are designed, but the usability is really brilliant. It's always going to be a bit difficult to get into the rearmost seats. That's the case with every car because they haven't got like a third set of doors. But unfolding the seats and folding them back down again is dead easy. A one tug affair. Oh, you 18, we'll try again, because the memory card failed last time, should be alright. Everybody looks miserable when they're driving their car, don't they? Except for me, I'm different to everybody else. I'm dead happy all the time. So it's very practical, and as a family car, awesome. Very easy to use, very nice to drive, priced better than a Discovery Sport, and really safe, right? It's a 5-star car, which most of these big things are now, but it got like a 97% score for adult occupant protection, which means it's probably going to be quite difficult to die in one of these, which is nice to know. The tank range is brilliant, but all that VWG diesel stuff aside, I just think the petrol stuff is that much more economical now and that much more pleasant that that's what I'd go for. Probably going to get about 35 miles per gallon out of either one of the petrols as opposed to about 40 out of this, but for me, slightly lower cost, generally much more pleasant experience, that's what I would go for. So all around, this is just so easy to recommend. The problem that I have with this car, if any, is that it's an example of the Volkswagen Group mismanaging the SEAT brand, not giving the SEAT brand a strong enough identity. So if this was noticeably more sporty or aggressive in the styling, or it was noticeably better to drive than the Kodiaq, then it would make more sense. But as it is, I don't understand why you would drive this and then drive the Kodiaq and not pick the Kodiaq. Damn it. And not pick the Skoda because they're virtually identical and that's cheaper. So the really sensible buyer, the really sensible family SUV, is going to go for the more sensibly priced one. It's what I'd do anyway. Or what I'd actually do is buy this, a French car. Weird. Speaking of which, I am definitely going to be reviewing a French thing next. I did say that a couple of weeks ago, but I've kept pushing it back. And what that means is that both video and car will be a lot more interesting than this whole thing, in theory anyway. Okay, see you later. Bye. Subscribe.